Before we begin, we want to acknowledge that some stories and discussions in this episode of Radiant Resilience may touch on sensitive and potentially triggering topics. These may include themes of discussion of an abusive relationship, religious trauma, injury and physical recovery, and emotional healing. Our goal is to share real-life experiences in a respectful and empathetic manner, offering insights into the complexities of the human spirit and the journey toward resilience. However, we understand that some content might be difficult for listeners. We encourage you to prioritize your well-being and discretion when deciding to listen. Please remember this podcast is not a substitute for professional advice or support. If you find yourself needing assistance, we urge you to seek help from qualified professionals or trusted support systems. Your mental and emotional health is important to us. Thank you for your courage and for joining us in a space of understanding and compassion. Welcome back, everyone, to Radiant Resilience. I have a returning guest with us today, Cynda Brock, who was on episode 11, I believe. So if you want to hear more of her backstory and how she is where she is today, which is what we're going to talk about on this episode, go back and re-listen to that one if you haven't already. But Cynda is a goddess, mother, daughter, friend, and business owner. She's the founder and trainer for Champions Equestrian, coach for 23 years as a professional in the horse world, grew up on a horse ranch, mother to Cooper and Taylor teenagers, and she went through a pretty awful marriage relationship early on. So we are going to start from the ending point of episode 11 and move forward to now because she has so many other interesting things to talk about. But I wanted to start off maybe just asking, so you were married to a preacher in the church, and I'm not really sure if you ever specified what religion line specifically.
I think I said I was raised Catholic in the Catholic Church up until I went to college, but I was raised also in the Baptist Bible Belt. So we had a
Right.
lot of non-denom churches, Baptist churches, raised Catholic, but married a Lutheran, which was really interesting. So I had a really big mix of seeing all of the religions just based on friendships and then who I married. But we were together, so married 17 years, but together for 19 years. So that's roughly about half your life. And if you think about when you actually started dating people or having a boyfriend, which I didn't have a lot of that either, you're thinking high school age. So you're like, man, that consumed quite a bit of years of my life.
Yeah, for sure. Even when I think of Colin and I, in February, we'll have been together 20 years, and I am 36 years old. Like, that is even more than half my life now. So that's crazy to think about when you think about that much time. Okay, so married for 17 years, with him for 19. Again, we won't go back too much and rehash all of that because we already did that. But first of all, welcome back. I just started talking, but hi, welcome back. How are you?
Wonderful, because I can't wait to talk about, even since April when that podcast was done, that very first podcast, so much has happened and we're sitting almost at September. So we're talking what, April, May, June, July, August, like basically a couple of months.
Yeah.
And it's been years in the making, the chapters I'm going to talk about today, but it happened really quickly. It was like a really great novel that you're just like turning the pages so quickly that you can't wait to see what's next. And that's been the last couple of months. So I'm excited about talking about that
Yeah,
today.
that's going to be a little bit towards the end. So everybody, make sure you make it to the end because she's got some great stuff to talk about. So
Good.
one of my main questions from the last episode that I was bummed that I didn't ask at the end or somewhere in there was, how did all of that relationship impact your relationship with religion and God and all of those type of things?
That is an amazing question because it continues to transform as you age, as you read, as you experience things. And I would say, initially coming out of that situation, I had such anxiety attacks going into the church that last couple months, the last year or more of marriage that I was together. It wasn't a focus on a relationship with God. It was the politics, leading worship. I don't know if I mentioned that last time. That was part of the requirement, so to speak, from him that he'd asked of me to do on top of the mothering and the businesses and the jobs was, hey, we need you to fill in for worship. We need you to fill in for different times when he's gone, which is a lot of responsibility, right? Leading worship for several thousand people. There's quite a demand of an expectation. And there was this amazing group and band, and I won't get into that, but I do miss playing. I miss music in that way. I will say it took me away from the guitar, which I played all of my life, and I did the cello for a little while, and now I'm working my way back to the guitar because I do love the music and the instrument in that sense. But I will say going back into a building, even no matter what, I couldn't do. So even just physically pulling up to a parking lot, walking in the doors, that was something where breathing patterns would change and eventually it would turn into an anxiety attack. And so I decided at that time after I left the church, why don't I figure out who God is and what he means to me after hearing so many rules from so many denominations, right? 20 something years baptized in the Catholic Church, non-denominational, Fellowship of Christian Athletes through college, marrying a Lutheran pastor. Then we've got a whole new set of rules, right? There's all these guidelines and doctrine and rules, and everybody's got this to follow, right? And so I just was like, let's take some time to go, who is God really? And I go back to when I was a little girl. My parents will tell you they had a lot of trouble getting me to even go to church because I was always at the barn.
Yeah.
I was I was always with the horses. And I remember just getting on a horse out in pasture and laying back and looking at the stars and just going, who I feel the closest to when I talk about God is when I'm outside, when I'm with animals, when I'm looking up at the sky, when I'm looking around and breathing in life is where I felt like I was the closest to God. And so I got that opportunity to spend that working as a horse trainer at these ranches as I got connected again, not just to myself, but I think that God's always spoken to me through creation.
Mm.
And through, I call them miracles sometimes because I don't tell my heart to beat. I don't tell my lungs to take air. I don't tell my brain to function. I don't have any control of that. I don't have any control of the sun, the moon, the planets, life and death. So the perspective of believing that there is a God is definitely there. And the way he speaks to me is definitely through creation. I would say, as far as any organized religion for me, I have friends that are deeply connected in those organizations who I adore and love, but it's not something for me that I will go back to. I don't see myself going back into a building for worship or for community. I feel like it's a different connection for me now at 48 years old.
Yeah.
um, Going back to a little bit of the way I was raised, and then now reconnecting by way of my job, being able to do that here. And it definitely provides a way of an avenue for healing, especially from that perspective.
Yeah, when I was thinking about after everything you shared in the last episode, and for those who don't know, Cynda is also one of my clients, my very dear clients. And so we talk a lot in the salon. And I'm like, gosh, I wonder what this did to her relationship with religion and with God, because I can imagine that after going through all that, there would be a lot of people that would be completely turned off to the entire organization of all of it after what you went through and what they were teaching you and the way that you were treated and everything. I like hearing that you didn't lose that relationship completely, because it seems like that was something that was a very big part of your life from day one.
It's at the core of who I am and how I see things, how I believe, how I think there's true inspiration from a lot of different organized kind of religions and ways, right? To where there's dedication, there's kindness, there's love, there's grace. All of those words are powerful words that can be a part of life. I think for me, I feel like a lot of the organized religion that I experienced wanted to fit me into a certain box. It was like, this is
Mhm.
the box you need to fit into, and this is the guidelines that you have to believe. And I felt like every day I'd wake up failing God in some way. And then the church was like, there's grace, but then you have to still follow these rules. And it just felt like you're in this match, this back and forth match with your soul, where you're going, wait a second. I know that there is a creation out there and a God out there that has given us all of this. I think it spans well past, I feel like, the limitations of what any organized religion says.
Yeah.
And so I feel like it goes beyond the walls of buildings, of books. of all those things. And I think that openness was created through the things I had to go through to get back to that core of understanding God, understanding who I was, my purpose for why I was here, and then where I'm going from here with that kind of foundation and that history.
Yeah, yeah, that would be really hard. But it sounds like you're pretty grounded in what you believe and how you want to, I guess, worship. I don't love that word, but however you want to celebrate God and incorporate him into your life, I guess is a better way to put that. I love that.
That's the connection for me has always been through animals. I will say that. And that is the connection I can't wait to share with people, because I think that I'm going to meet people that come in. I meet people every day that come into this facility or come into a ranch and meet horses. And it doesn't matter how old they are, where they're from, what their political views are, what their religious views are. When there's a connection with a being that happens to be a horse, it knocks down all of those walls, and it does what it did to me. It gets down to that core understanding of being in the moment right now. Where are you? I'm right here. And being present. That's something I think that I see people struggle with, even myself, being present. I have this giant past. I have this exciting future, but I don't want to miss that present moment of not missing anything, especially if it has to do with something that's in creation. Oh, it's amazing out there.
Yeah, for real. And horses, I've heard. I am slightly afraid of horses, I'm not going to lie. But I do think they are beautiful, amazing beings for sure that I have a lot of respect for, because I think animals in general, when I've done like animal safaris in the past and just seeing those animals in their natural habitats, and it truly is amazing. Like, we live in an amazing planet to house all of these different beings and things and ecosystems and all the things. It's pretty incredible.
When I think, and we'll touch on this later, the man that I am engaged to, this beautiful man, he, him and I merged our lives in a way where I started showing him what was in front of him and what was around him, more like animals and creation and things like that. And he's been showing me the stars and the planets. He's very much into astronomy. And so I every once in a while would look up and look at the stars. But my world seems really small sometimes. He's saying, no, there's places beyond this. There are planets and galaxies and stars, light years and years away. And I'm going, I just have never thought about that. And that kind of he expanded that view for me of going, oh, God's even bigger than just the creation that you see here. To expand that beyond is what he's done for me and added this beauty to our relationship together. And I think he'd say the same thing about me. I point out hummingbirds and butterflies and cows and horses. And I just would never even have noticed that before.
I love that.
Yeah. And so it's this really beautiful match of expression, I think, in our love is the things that we see that make us light up, right? For him, it's planets and stars, and me, I think. And for me, it's him and animals, right? And children. And it's kind of this fun combination. Yeah.
Love that. After your divorce, there's a few years that go in between there, but eventually you move to the ranch that you're at currently and have your own business training and everything there. And I know that a few years into, or was it even a year into it, that you had your accident? Hi, friend, and welcome to this episode of Radiant Resilience. We are always looking for new guests on the podcast. I want to highlight you if you have a story of resilience that inspires others. Everyone has a story, and I believe that sharing yours can help others feel less alone. Are you ready to share your journey and inspire others? I want to hear from you. Every story has the power to impact lives and foster a supportive community. If you have a tale of overcoming adversity, personal growth, or a unique perspective on life's challenges, I would love to have you as a guest on the podcast. To become a guest, please email us directly at radientresiliencepodcast@gmail.com or click the link in the show notes to become a guest. Join us in spreading hope, strength, and inspiration one story at a time. Be brave and share your story so others feel less alone. I hope to see you soon.
3 or 4 months. We moved in here April 1st of 2022 in this ranch. I worked for 12 years in Sedalia at a facility that was just maybe a couple miles from here. And I always felt like this area in Colorado was home for me. It felt the most like home because it was like the ranch where I grew up. And so when I drove up to this property and I first saw it, it was actually for sale. And I was like, I could see myself here. I could see beyond the arena type horse care and love and sharing with people here. And so we moved in April 2022. And that was quite an endeavor. I will say I will probably not take that on again, managing the facility as well as training. And it was August, actually middle of August, that I came off a horse and had probably the most devastating accident I've ever had on an animal before. It was a training accident. And again, that day was a day that I had a list of horses and I had a list of work and things I had to do. And the way it worked out was I was just actually in the pasture right next door to where we're doing this video. And he either got stung or bit or something happened. He was this really big Irish horse and he came up underneath me and reared up and bucked at the same time. And I was launched about 2 stories off of him. And I blacked out. I remember blacking out and coming to, and I couldn't move my back and my body as much. And I just waited a little bit, started to get my breathing under control because it really knocked the wind out of me too, because I had broken bones. And I realized that I knew that I had broken bones. And it ended up being that I broke 5 places in my back. I tore my glute and I was in a bed for several months and couldn't walk. So that was very unexpected. Let's just say it really puts a damper on not just your business, but being a mom. Eventually moving out here, I wanted to start dating, and that's a story we'll get into later. But I got knocked literally down and I laid in a bed for several months. You were with me during that time. I know you were part of that story. You saw me go from moving into the ranch to being completely broken. And
And
even
for
you
somebody like you are somebody who moves and moves and moves and moves.
all the
Like I
time.
don't know you to be this person. Like you don't have a desk job. You don't, and you're just like somebody that wants to do things all the time. And so sitting in your bed reading a book is not a Cynda thing to be doing at all. So that was extremely traumatizing, I think, for you.
It was a giant reset button that I think that in hindsight, especially working with my own counselors through this, they're like, these things happen for a reason. Of course, I'm like, yes, I do know this. I've been through enough to know that. And
That
it's
that phrase does infuriate me though, because like
the time, doesn't it? Especially if you're in the thick of it. And then
I think that's the problem. You can look back on these moments and see that, but I don't know anyone that is in the thick of it, in the middle of it, that actually wants to hear that or will accept it when heard.
And it is so humbling because thank goodness I was at this ranch, as big as an endeavor as this was to take on as a business. My visual view of sitting up in a bed, just it's time. They said, you don't need surgery, you need time. You need time for those bones to go back together. And they said it could be 3 months, it could be 6 months, it could be a year. Nobody had a time span on how fast your body heals,
Ugh.
right? And so my windows and my sliding glass doors faced the ranch, and the life that I saw was turkeys, elk, horses. My daughter would bring my horse up to my sliding glass door, or her horse actually up to the sliding glass door. So I was still connected, and I was like, okay, there's something to learn here. Breathing was the only thing I could do. Breathing, sleeping, meditation, reading. And it was truly the first time, literally, I had taken a break from my job.
Which
And
was the universe probably
oh,
hinting at
yes.
something
Oh,
there.
yes.
As much as we don't want to admit it and acknowledge it in the moment, I'm sure that was a part of it as well.
Clear. It was like, lady, you're not just running one business, you're running two.
Mm.
And this isn't the direction you should be going. You got here, we got you here. We're going to take care of you. As I truly felt like I was going to get taken care of. It was a giant financial blow in that sense, but you recover from those things. I recovered from that, obviously, from the marriage. And yet, when you can't work, and as a horse trainer, a lot of people don't know this, you don't insure horse trainers because of this reason, meaning because of the accidents, because of the risk involved. So you don't have workers' comp for yourself. You don't have disability for yourself. You have health insurance. And that's pretty much what saves you from going under several $1,000,000, especially if it's a big accident.
But that
But
only covers medical bills. That's not covering your time off and stuff. I'm the same way. Like I don't have
you don't have a salary. You have
any of
an
that stuff.
hourly wage, right? And I also didn't have a spouse. I didn't have a secondary income paying the bills and the rent and the children. And so you really get creative with people financially to try and navigate those things. I had some help from people that saw my business as a success for so many years. It was still a success even whenever I was down. It just wasn't me in the ring doing it. I had to pay 5 people to do my job.
Yeah. We learned that at the pizzeria real quick too. Like my mother-in-law ran the kitchen and we did. If she wasn't there, and it was something that I think was a little bit difficult for them to accept from time to time. Like if you didn't work here, we were like, it takes three teenage kids to do or more to do what you do. Like you are so valuable to us in that regard. And I think when you're the business owner too, like you just that you have to, right? And you want control of it all. That's why you're a business owner. So you're controlling all the different little pieces and you figure out how to multitask and how to do all the things and how to make sure it all gets done. And it all means so much more to you when you're the owner of it than it does to the employees that are just showing up to their job every day.
Thank goodness I'm so grateful for that time, because there were some really extraordinary people, whether they were business managers, assistant trainers that stepped in, clients that were like, wow, we didn't know. Because at that point, the doctors were like, we're going to be hopeful that you'll walk. We're not telling you that you're going to ride a horse again. We're not telling you that you're going to be an athlete again, which that was, I've thrived on being an athlete my whole life. I've thrived on being able to physically do the labor of ranch work and riding my whole life. And so this big reset button, right? This big pause in your life is going, should we do this a different way? Is because this can happen again. And so what are you going to do different that's going to, as a business person, as somebody that was financially responsible for 3 beings and animals, my children, myself, how are you going to have an income that you can rely on, or a business that you can rely on that doesn't depend on you being on the back of a horse or standing in an arena teaching? And so that time frame of laying in the bed also gives you that opportunity to take a different direction. So then you start thinking about a book, you start thinking about videos, you start thinking about being a clinician in a way where physically you still have to be in person, but I'm not responsible for a ranch or daily decisions for horses and training and things like that. So you start navigating your business in such a way and your life in such a way that says, I know this can happen again, this can happen anywhere, but what kind of a business and an income can you provide for yourself that doesn't rely on you being on the back of a horse? And so that was a game changer. That piece was a game changer. The physical piece, I had that accident, I was 45, right? And so I'm going, okay, I definitely recovered faster because I was in such good shape. I went to physical therapy 3 months earlier than what they wanted me, because I just said, look, I have to get back in the ring in some way safely, because my children are relying on me. My business is relying. I can't take a 6-month sabbatical and recover without going bankrupt, right? So that piece, that athletic piece, that mindset, that training, I'll call it, if you will, from coming out of that marriage, I was like, look, lady, look at what you've gotten through. You've been trained to this point to get through this next chapter, even though nobody wanted this, including me. I was like, I'm free of this marriage. I'm in this ranch. I'm going to live in such a way where I've got this relationship and this new lease on life, right? And this experience. And it's like, nope, you're not quite done learning yet. So, and I don't think I ever will be, but it's one of those where it was a game changer for decisions that I had made for the business, decisions I was making for my personal choices, how I spent my time, and really going, this we'll talk about later, was I've waited 7 years. That was at that point, the accident was 2022. I was single 2017. So it'd been 5 years. I'd been single for 5 years and not dated, not done anything, not gone to dinners with anyone for a reason to go through healing. And now there was this accident, and I'm laying in a bed going, how am I going to go out and get to know somebody now? So
Yeah.
develop a new relationship with somebody that's on my dream board laying in a bed. And so I was like, okay, you still got some time to work on yourself. And so that's another 2 years. So here we're sitting 7 years post that marriage going, I looked out and I was like, I've been the most isolated, as much as I love this ranch, that I've ever been from society. So I was sitting in a bed talking to my daughter. I'd recovered from the accident. I'd started to take my business in a little bit different direction. And I just told Taylor, I said, if I don't really start meeting people and getting out there now, when am I going to have the time to do it, the desire to do it, the perfect opportunity or position in life to do it? Am I going to wait till my children are finally out of high school in 4 or 5 years? Am I going to wait until I'm in some type of financial stability? Who is out there that can go along this journey with me at this time? And so I told Taylor, I said, okay, look up online and what dating apps are out there. I said, what is an online safe, not looking for a fling or a one night stand, something that will show as much of me that's possible through pictures and through answering questions. And eHarmony popped up. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've heard of eHarmony. It's been around for, I think, 2 decades,
I
hasn't
feel
it?
like
Like
they had to have been like
the first
the
one, right?
first ones because I
Right.
remember way back when, yeah, I feel like they were the first. They were the pioneers of that industry for sure.
They were. And so I was like, oh, I've heard of that. And I had asked, and I think I'd talked to you about it. I think I'd asked you your advice because I think you'd talked to so many people that sit in your chair. I talked to friends, I talked to different people, and I said, okay, what's your experience? What's out there? What is it? And eHarmony pops up. And so here, Taylor and I, my 15-year-old daughter, are sitting here going, okay, let's make a profile. Let's pick some pictures. And it was a really cool process because it was like a 2 hour test. It was like you had to answer personality questions, past questions, future questions, hobbies. Like it gave the most detail. And I was like, okay, I have two ways to do this. I can either be vague or I can speak the way I spoke on that podcast with you, the way I'm talking to you now. I can speak in my language in such a way where whoever gets a glimpse of that profile is going to go, I might want to get to know her a little bit more. And
Mm.
so I went through that process and I think I did that profile in May. Oh, was it May or April? It might have been like right after our podcast. I think it might have been end of April. And through, yeah, it was actually, it was after that podcast that I made an account and I really just learned about the industry quite a bit. And I didn't go on any dates. I got a lot of messages from people and I looked and I was like, okay, I want something in my life that I also am drawn to, not just somebody's physical looks, right? Because my age bracket that I chosen was between like 42 and 54. And you get a big range of people right in that range. If you're young 40s, you probably got elementary school kids. If you're mid 50s, your kids are like high school or college or out. And I'm in the middle of that
Yeah.
bracket. And so I saw different walks of life and connections, and eHarmony tries to give you a score of how you're connected with this person, right? And so I saw a lot of people, I saw a lot of profiles, and Taylor, of course, and Taylor, man, she's brutally honest, but in a wonderful way, where she's, mom, don't settle just to go out to dinner with somebody, even though you haven't been out to dinner in a long time.
Mhm.
And I said, you know what, you're right. And plus, I didn't have a lot of time on my hands. I was getting ready to approach the 2024 competition season. And that is the busiest time that I've always avoided adding anything in my life.
Sure.
Again, I was like, if you don't do this now, you're going to be another season past this.
Let's talk about that for a minute of there's a lot of things in life that are like that, right? That are like, I don't know, if you don't, there's always a reason not to in the moment. I feel like you can come up with any reason not to do the thing in the moment. And like you said, whether it was, okay, I'm going into my busiest season of the year, then after that, it's okay, maybe I'll wait till the kids are teenagers. Okay, maybe I'll wait till I have more financial stability. Oh, maybe now I'm just good. I'm like,
I did muscle testing. So that was one of the things that I learned through all the counseling and through all the things I've done was I ask myself questions and I allow them to sit if they don't have an answer. And so I allow my body, I trust the connection between my mind, my heart, my soul, my body now through that 7 years, right, of reconnecting that was so disconnected that I ask myself, I think a couple times a year in that 7 year period, are you ready to start dating? Are you ready to open your life up to somebody and have a relationship come in? And it was always no, because I
why
didn't.
was that?
Oh, those are good answers, right? I told Dan this too. I said, he goes, why? He goes, why is somebody like you single in 7 years?
Let's be real, Cynda. You're gorgeous. You are successful. You are smart. You have a lot going for you. You're fun. Like you have a lot going for you. So I'm curious too.
Why was it? So the first couple of years, it was just recovering from a divorce, from a relationship, not jumping into something without knowing myself.
Which I
And
think is very important to heal from.
Yes. Not, I'm going, wait, what did I compromise? What did I give? What do I not want to do again? So a lot of people come out of
Mm.
situations and they know what they don't want. I knew what I didn't want, but I didn't know what I wanted. And so that took some time to develop. Okay. The other thing too is as much as I was with my children for many years of my career that I had to bring them with me to my job, those last couple years I had paid two nannies to be with them and they were with their dad. And so coming out of that situation, I would say if you ask my children, they both said at the time, we really didn't see you. We didn't know you. And remember, I was working 100 hours a week because I was financially getting the marriage out from underneath the debt that he had put us in. And so my children didn't know that, right? I wasn't going to go back and go, children. The reason why I was gone is because I was paying for us. They didn't know at their age. And so I took those years to develop the relationship with them, to develop the relationship with myself, and to know what I wanted. So that took a couple of years to really take what I called in that first episode, all of the broken pieces, put back together what I wanted, and then start developing the opportunity to dream again. Because when you're in those situations for those couple of years, you're not really thinking about dreaming. You might fantasize a little bit, but you're not really thinking about the dream board, that beautiful picture of what you wanted life to be. You're still in the survival phase and in the struggle,
I
you
was going
know.
to say, would you call that survival mode, like being in survival mode after that?
Not sustainable. Those paces of survival can only last so long until it takes its toll on you physically, for sure. I did feel that depletion. I'll touch on that just a little bit. One beautiful thing that I've added in this last year, and I'm at a year, is I felt myself depleted of. I felt like I was healthy as an athlete. I felt like I'd taken care of myself in a lot of ways physically, but what you don't realize are depleting are, as you age, your hormones,
Oh,
your goals. Oh, yes. When I just was like, why am I exhausted? I know why, because of whoa, of what I'm managing as a single person, as a mom, as a business owner. Those in combination are enough. But then you don't realize the internal havoc that it wreaks on your body just trying to do what you're asking it to do. And so I had a really good friend that said, hey, Cynda, when's the last time you had your estrogen checked and your testosterone checked and your vitamin B and your vitamin D and your thyroid? And I was like, never, not outside of having children, right?
mm,
Not even when you go to your annual, you might draw blood, but you're not really checking a lot of those levels unless you're being specific about it. And I think that's a big piece of what made a connection for me. And this is something I'll share that I can't wait to share with a lot of women is that my hormone levels, my testosterone specifically, was supposed to be between 180 and 220. Mine came back at a 7. And so when the doctor
oh, wow.
so when you're talking about weight gain, energy levels, sleep patterns, sex drive, which again, I had that on my dream board, a passionate, sexual, exciting. I'll say that I've got wonderful words to describe that, but I wanted
Yeah.
to be somebody that was like, oh yeah, this is still very much part of something I want to be in a relationship. I looked at the information on that blood draw and I was like, I'm at a 7. No wonder. She's saying your body, it can't even make testosterone anymore. It's so depleted.
Mm,
Thyroid is low. My estrogen actually surprisingly was really good, but my vitamin B was low, obviously from trying to keep up. And so the giant number was that testosterone number. And I loved the fact that I invested in that world and I took testosterone pellets. They did those every 3 months and they slowly bring your levels up. And I'm telling you what, is that not a new lease on life at a 48-year-old woman, 47, 48-year-old woman? I feel like I'm in my 20s or 30s. It feels like I get to relive a little bit of that energy and that desire, especially now that I'm in a relationship. That's just a gift to both of us.
yeah.
Desire. I didn't do that. Tawny, I think about, I chose sports, I chose horses, I chose basketball, I chose to be married. I chose that path. I didn't date, I didn't go out and have sex, I didn't go out and party and all these things like I hear a lot of my 20-year-old assistant trainers and things doing. And I'm going, man, it feels like I get to have this experience again at this age. And I can't wait for the next decade of feeling like I know my body at a new level.
Mm,
So many layers to us as human beings, isn't there? I mean,
yes.
there's so many layers that, and people walk in the door, I think, at the right time, and that openness is there for you to go, Cynda, have you thought about your hormone levels? No, I haven't thought about them ever.
Yeah.
Even ever. And a lot about hormones, don't you? I mean, you know what I
I
mean?
do, but you know what? It's a similar situation where I wouldn't know everything that I know unless I went through what I went through. And I think that the general public who can just get pregnant and have babies, no problem, unless you started having symptoms and stuff like that, like they're not checking that stuff. And I've seen in the infertility world right now, a lot of people pushing for preconception testing, of testing those blood levels, checking all the things. If anybody's watching this video, it just got a thumbs up.
Thumbs up.
But yeah, unless there's something blatantly wrong, we're not having those levels checked. And I feel like it is something that we need to advocate for ourselves in that regard in the medical world as women, to have them checked because they change so much. Like I have said so many times, this is a bit of a tangent, but men have no idea how lucky they are to be
I
men.
know.
Like,
When I
in
had some passion and learned about men's testosterone levels drop as well. Like the information I was reading, the book, this doctor, Dr. Cunningham, she put out this book about men and women and said, okay, this is what's going to happen as you age. You start dropping levels and hormones levels in your late 20s and 30s. And I was like, oh my God, I'm 47. How far away am I? I'm not in menopause yet, but I'm not in baby making stage. And so the things I noticed, the triggers for me were that I was angry, like I was frustrated, I was temperamental, I was short tempered. My children will tell you, they're like, man, you would just bite our heads off. And I was like, gosh, I just thought it was because of my job and I was so tired. And yet when I cried, when she read those numbers to me, Taylor was with me and I just cried. And I was like, she goes, Cynda, we have a plan. We're going to help you. And I'm telling you, it is a game changer when you know that level of your body and you're going, oh, it doesn't have to be this way. You don't have to be miserable aging. And
yeah.
the other thing she told me that was a game changer too, coming out of my back injury, I had gained weight, obviously being in a bed for several months and not being able to be physically active at a level that I was at. When you work 12 to 16-hour days on a ranch, it's farm fitness. You don't necessarily go to a gym, right? You're not lifting weights because you come out and that's your life. And so I had gained weight. And she said, Cynda, if you're not producing testosterone, you're gaining weight when you're working out. And I was
Oh,
like,
wow.
wait, oh yeah. I was like, you're telling me I can diet, I can exercise, and I'm not going to lose weight. I'm going to gain weight. And she said, yes. She goes, here's what you're going to do. You're going to not work out for 6 months. And I was like, okay. Somebody for the first time in my life, Tawny, said, don't work out. And she said, I know your job. I know you have to do your job, but I don't want you doing anything. You need to allow your body to recover from everything in these last couple of years, from your accident, from your divorce, from all these things that have just added up, that have depleted you. You need to take a rest from that. And so I think that was wonderful advice, because now on the flip side, I love Pilates. I love life fitness again. I love my job, the physicalness of my job again. And it changes right as you age. And so that hormonal panel a year ago in September, I'm at a year, was a life changer for me. And I hope that most women, if they hear this, just it's worth a blood draw. It's worth you educating yourself. And I think you'd say that from your perspective too, from even the infertility side. It's so worth you knowing yourself at that level that you don't have to be physically miserable and go down that route of depression or drugs or medication or diets or struggling through weight loss or all those things. That's the road I was going towards, that I was like, this is just not the way I see the next 30 years of my life going. And
Yeah.
yeah, that was a big changer for me, that I hope that most women, if they hear this, it's worth a blood draw. I'm telling you, find a place that's, I had to go outside of my normal physician. I went to somebody specific in the hormone world that was doing hormone replacement therapy and doing this direction. So that might be some research that maybe people will do, that men and women, it's not just for women.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so important, especially as we age. And I just think, yes, men's testosterone drops as they get older, but ours are literally like this every month.
All the time. And I would say that is something that balanced for me. I was like, for the first time in my life, I felt like I had balance internally in hormones.
Mm.
When doing blood draws every 3 to 6 months, I mean, they're checking them, they're regulating it, they're really watching you and seeing how it impacts you. it is the most stable I felt like I've been able to be. And I will say that adds this level of compassion and empathy when you're not managing what turmoil is happening that you may not have control of what's going on inside. And I will say I did look at my sleep patterns, those darker blue, like call them like depression type patterns. When you don't have that confidence, I didn't have confidence in myself. I think you saw me. You did see me actually.
Mhm.
You saw me go from a giant high powered athlete running a ranch to an injury to weight gain. I think you and I talked about that. We talked about our confidence changing. I think I cried in your chair about that, right? Thank goodness your hair is so beautiful, because I'd walk out and I
Oh.
was like, okay, this is like the one thing was my hair that I was like, okay, it's curled and I feel feminine and I feel beautiful in that way. And I will say that journey of hormones has drastically changed that, shedding that light. I think you'd say the same thing for you in a totally different direction from infertility.
Yeah, absolutely. When I talk to people who have just like even my own sister who got pregnant pretty easily with my niece and my nephew, she doesn't even know half of what I know about my body. And it's because she didn't have to, right? Like I was forced into that. And I now know I am so in tune with my cycles and my body and how I feel. And I had a call with my energy gal earlier today, and we were talking about that. Like I went off of my infertility meds back in November before this recording, and it's August. I'm 9 months out or well, 10 months out. I don't know, something like that. And I am just now getting back to a normal cycle.
Isn't
Yeah.
that incredible? It can take a year. They say it can take, you have to give yourself grace for a year. And they said, how long did it take you to get like this? Right? How
Mm,
And I think that's a problem with society. And it's really a lot of pressure being a woman because, and I was single and I was like, you have those moments of doubt where you're going, coming out of that marriage, I was like, who is going to want me? Like, you
mm,
have that feeling of being a minister's wife. There's a label, I think. Being a former minister's wife, there's a label. Being a business owner, there's a label. There's labels. I think there's ways that you get stamped in a way. And so I think as a woman in my late 40s, a lot of people were like, what's the pool of people that are really out there for you to be able to be with, and who wants to be with you? And that pressure of how you look, how you feel, how you carry yourself. I think that as women, I think we face that from the time that we recognize it as young teenagers. I talked to my own daughter about that, who's 15. And I talk to women that are in their 60s and 70s. You talk to our moms that are in their 70s. Truly ask them, how do they feel as a woman? Do they still feel feminine? Do they still feel beautiful in these chapters? And I would say it's taken me a while from that marriage to feel that way, building what I call my soul in that way. And then this new piece of adding the hormones, right? And then you really look at this picture of going, wow, I know so much more than I
mm.
did. And
Yeah, and I think that we talked about too, you're a very independent woman. Like I said, you're smart, you're an amazing business owner, you're very successful. And we talked about, I remember men being intimidated by you.
the way I carry myself, I knew it was going to take a really special person to hold his own space and then be able to join in a space with somebody like that, because I felt like I had so much love to still give and share with somebody. And I felt like I wanted to have someone that could, having someone that can carry themselves is a big thing. And I feel like the relationship I was in and the relationships I saw, and even the men that I would meet just along my journey, not people that I would date, I was just like, God, it feels really lonely being in a
Mm,
position knowing that I needed somebody to be able to carry themselves and yet hold a space for me, not just me hold a space for them. And how do you hold a space for a woman that honestly would rather be alone than compromise my own soul again? I
mm,
would rather be alone and enjoy everything else in life. As much as I felt lonely, as much as I wanted, desired sex, love, passion, all those things, I wouldn't compromise myself again. And so I was like, man, this is a really big list for a man. And I think I told you at the very beginning, when I, back in September, actually, when I first started hormones, a year ago, I actually wrote down a list, and it was my dream list for a future relationship. And it starts out, some of the words that I used were kindness, love, light, truth, respect, compassion, adventure, breathing, dreaming, sex, fucking. Those are two different things.
Yes, actually, okay. Can I pause you right there for a minute?
Yes, yes, yeah.
So I am currently reading, I hope this isn't any spoilers for anybody out there, but I'm currently reading those Sarah J. Maas, the Court of Thorns and Roses books.
Yes.
And they're spicy fantasy books. And in the book that I'm reading now, the main character, I won't go into too much detail, so I don't want to spoil it for anybody out there who's listening and reading at the same time or hasn't read them or whatever. But the book that I'm on now, and the main girl character in it discovers the difference between lovemaking and fucking, and she does both with her partner.
That's right. And that can be done, Tawny. That dream list, you just dream big. Because I remember it's fun having a young teenage daughter because she has books as well. You have books. And I feel like there's something to imagination. And I think there's wonderful authors right out there that go, here's not just fantasy, but some experience going, there is a difference between passion, eroticism, sensuality, fucking, passion, love making, true love, right? There is that, but I wanted it in one person.
Yeah.
If this is what I want, then I'm not going to spare anything. There's kissing, there's chemistry, there's electricity, right? There's laughter, sense of humor, that was part of it. Rest was a big part of things on my list, holding space, abundance, financial independence, right? I had already experienced somebody that devastated us financially, that I was like, man, it is fucking hard as a woman to carry yourself, let alone carry your children and your own business by yourself. I was like, please send me somebody that isn't going to be dependent on me. And it's not that I can't support somebody, because I do know that we're going to go through periods and times in life when we have jobs and we don't have jobs. There's this balance though, but I had never experienced somebody bringing themselves to the table with this financial abundance that supported us. And that I wanted, that was on my list. I was like, if I'm really thinking about the list I want in someone, I wish this. And so the fun part about what I've talked to people about is how many people actually don't write things down. They might have a thought about what they want, but I find that in my experience, writing it on notes in my phone or writing it in a journal really brings it to life. And that was a question, I think, on the last podcast. What is the truest and most beautiful story you can imagine about life, about love? It's not just imagining it. It was actually, for me, putting it on paper and going back and looking at that list, not just because I didn't want to compromise, but also because I wanted to continue to dream about what that could be with a person. And I will say, as good as my list was, man, this new guy, the guy that I am marrying, blows that out of the water and it helps me discover things I didn't even think about that I wanted.
Well, it's
Things
just
that,
like doing a dream board, right? When you write it down, when you put it as something tangible and not just something in your head, it makes it more real. And for me, it makes it easier to manifest, I think, in as much as you can.
and the beautiful part about, I wanted someone who also had similar thoughts this way. And so I was truly looking for somebody that wanted a dream board list of someone, but then wanted to take our lives and make a dream board list together. And
Mm.
that's what we did early on in our dating relationship. He was doing his work, I was doing my work. We started talking about the work together. We got inspired by his actual life coach and counselor was like, here's, as a couple, what you can start thinking about. Here's what you need to know about each other and how you were, what your past is. We went through all of that. Here's where we're at. Here's what we're working on. Where do we want to go together? And I had never done that with somebody before, right? Who's thought about truly going, okay, I just don't want to be with somebody and I don't want it to just be all these things and wants and desires and what we share. What are we dreaming about together? And so we actually have two whiteboards that are sitting next to me of the next year of things that we want to do together and how we want our relationship to be and how we're taking it and merging it in such a way where we know that independent work is important and you have to keep doing that. I told him that. I said, your soul, you and your soul matter more to me, that you're working on that independently and that I'm working on that, that then when we come together, we are so much stronger together when we are working on those things. And so we're not giving up that work, even though we've merged in a relationship, there's still that independent work that has to be done.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you're not healed yourself, then you can only give so much to someone else, right?
It creates a empathy in a relationship, I find, when I'm honest. And it was really fun. We had some we had some fun first times together where we were learning about each other, right? And he also is a very independent man that took the world on his shoulders, provided and still provides for his children and for his family in a way. And so I could tell that we were both very similar in that way, that we were like Superman and Wonder Woman. I was like, well, how do you take two superheroes and go, okay, how do you work together? How do you be the Justice League in a way? And how do you not take on so much in a relationship because that's what you've always done? How do
Mhm.
you share that together? How do you work together? And I always told him, I said, if you find me short or quiet or upset, just say, hey, what's going on? And that's a legitimate question where I might know the answer at that time and I might not. We've given ourselves freedom of permission to ask, freedom to speak truth, freedom to hold space for each other. And that's a new development for me that's always been on the dream board, right? It's always been a fantasy, even, right? If I could have a relationship, you almost want a reflection of yourself. And I tell Dan this all the time. I said, do you know how much you say that I could say right back to you? Because
Mm.
we're reflecting light and love and empathy and understanding in this almost different world, like this other galaxy in a way, is what I tell
Yeah.
him. And we always tell each other, we're like, can you believe we found each other? I'm like, yeah, I can, because this is what we've both been dreaming about this whole time. And then we're like, oh yeah, that's right. Okay, we can believe it now because it's actually here. But it's really fun to just feel how lucky and how special it is, and yet not stop turning the pages of the relationship,
Mm.
going, okay, what is that next page? We've had to already experience a death in the family. We've
Mm.
had to experience an injury with a child getting hurt in their sport. We've had to experience business changes, drastic business changes in my business. The horse industry is not a kind one when it comes to your budget, your finances. One month I'll have a $4,000, $5,000 influx, and the next month, five people decided to leave. And
Mm.
you're going, how do I manage a budget that you're on a track for as a business owner that can drastically change with the death of horses or clients changing? And that's the other inspiration, right? In my business, I told Dan, I said, the next 1 to 3 years for me is the inspiration of being a speaker, being somebody that does clinics, somebody that writes a book, somebody that has different ways to love my connection with animals and teaching people, that doesn't rely on a sport having just a horse or a person be here. It's very difficult to run a business like that. And I think you would sympathize, right? 1 minute a client, or you might have five clients walk out the door that you have to replace, that have to be in your chair. It's very similar, isn't it?
Yeah. And for me, really, for my industry, COVID really hit us with that, right? Like we were all very comfortable. The industry was thriving and it was doing really well. And we always used to say too that the hair industry is recession proof because everybody always needs their haircut.
They need their hair done. Yeah.
They may go longer in between color appointments, or they may take out their extensions, or but everybody always needs a haircut. And then when COVID hit and we were shut down completely, we were completely out of work. We were like, oh, we are no longer recession proof.
Yes. Or COVID proof, right? Recession proof.
Yes, it really brought to light that we really need to have other plans in place and maybe a bit of a bigger savings for if something does happen or things like that. For us, unfortunately, aside from actually doing hair, there's not a whole lot of other avenues we can go, but we did get creative in that time frame. I will say that.
It is inspiring. I think when you look at anything that happens, whether it's a worldwide phenomenon like this, whether it's something personal, like a divorce, like what I went through, I think that as you look at those situations, at some point you get to a place in your life where they're inspiring. And at some point you look at the transformation that you go, I'm so happy. I tell people this and they're shocked when I say it. I can think of my happiest moment and day that I had when I was married, and it doesn't even compare. I'd rather take my hardest day, probably laying in a bed broken, was
Mm.
better than my happiest day being in that relationship. And that's a big statement because I just go now looking back and I see the transformation of the person that I am today. And I can't wait to keep transforming into who I am. I never want to settle for who I've
Mm.
been or who I was. I always want to keep that door open of the turning of the pages and the transformation happening. I always listen to conversations with people in different situations where they're like, man, I just hate change. And I'm going, man, I love it. I love it so much that it's a challenge, that it's hard because we can do hard things, but I don't want to be the same person that I was. I want to be
Mm.
something that was inspired out of what happened and somebody who can be inspired by others. And that's exactly what you're doing. You started this podcast. You're going, how can I inspire from my own story,
Mm.
but take the stories of the amazing women that still are challenged today? If you think about the people you've done podcasts with, they haven't stopped being challenged.
Mm-mm. No, it moves on to something. For you, it was the divorce, and then it
Yep.
was the accident. And I think we're always a work in progress, and there's always life is going to happen. People are going to die. Tragic things are going to happen. Life's going to throw shit at us, and it's never going to end. And I think what we can do is just learn from those experiences and heal from those so that in the future you can deal with it maybe a little bit easier, at least.
I think about that when I'm teaching these young teenagers, especially my own kids, it's perspective. They get a little irritated at me because they're like, could we just vent to you without you having some inspiring story or in some book, mom, some quote, could we just want to vent? Don't fix it, you know?
Mm.
And yet it's so hard because I know that's part of the purpose of why I'm here. It is that inspirational story, and yet I love being inspired. One of the books that I just almost completed was the Brittany Griner story when she was imprisoned in Russia. And this was a WNBA basketball player, a gold medalist. She was on a basketball team in Russia as a professional for 7 years. And that's a great book that we got from We Can Do Hard Things. She was on that podcast, right? And so I'm sitting here going, on my hardest day, sometimes at the ranch, I was listening to Brittany Griner talk about her literally being in a Russian prison as a
Wild.
fine Black woman who is
Mm.
a lesbian. And I'm going, oh my gosh. Okay, perspective, right?
Yeah.
Everything, something happens that's difficult that day, sometimes within minutes, there is some kind of perspective that is brought into your being, your space that's, wait a second, be open to what you're supposed to learn here. Breathe. Oh gosh, please breathe.
Mm.
Breathe and be empathetic. I think that's one of the biggest words I've found coming out of that marriage is people go, you didn't spend a lot of time being bitter or being angry. And I said, one, I didn't have time.
Mm.
But two, even to this day, I wish him the best life. I hope that he transforms out of what happened to him and me, because it happened to both of us, right? I hope that he can turn the page and be in a relationship that is inspiring, one that he can learn from. And most people, I think if you look back at the trauma that happens in their divorces, how many people can say, I do wish them well and the best?
Mm.
And it's because we had children connected as little as they're in his life. We still had children connected that have graduations and marriages and things, milestones that you're going to have a father present for, or you're going to have, where is your dad? There are times when I think people, I listen to their story and I just go, what kind of powerful words could you put out there for that former spouse that would wish them the best life in spite of what happened to both of you?
I think forgiveness plays a huge role in that too.
Isn't it? Forgiveness and grace and empathy. Forgiving yourself was a big piece. And I don't remember if I touched on
Mm.
that in that last podcast, but I think I will say, reading that book about Brittany, she said, I was the last person to forgive myself for the mistakes that I made because it caused so much harm to my own family members. Forgiving myself because she carried empty cartridges to Russia that were to spoil the books, right? We love our books.
I
And
think a lot of people know that story.
story right because she carried those cartridges because it was legal in the US where she could have them, and then she carried them to Russia. They were illegal. She got sentenced to 9 years in prison, and you're just going, this is a little bit mind-blowing. How could somebody have that happen? And so you think about that, you think about a lot of those times in the darkness, and you just go, what needs to truly happen here is forgiving myself for allowing so many things to happen during that time frame, and being quicker moving forward as you allow things. I do those, I think I've talked about doing those questions. You ask yourself those questions. Are my soul and my body and everything in alignment here? Am I trying to force my soul or my body to do something that doesn't want to do? So actually taking the time to ask yourself a question, is this in alignment with who I am? Is this relationship? Is this business direction? Is this client? Is this friendship? And allowing people to leave your life is a big part of this. Allowing people, I think, even that you didn't think would leave your life is a big,
Mm.
and allowing them to be on their journey. That's a huge part of opening up yourself to understanding humans, is going, how much do I need to let go of this relationship and this person because they need to experience some things.
Mm.
Letting go with grace is a big part of that. Well, even if it was a great relationship, right?
Yeah. Ooh, that was some good words. You're so smart. And I love having these conversations with you, but I do want to back up a little bit
Yeah.
because we didn't exactly talk about you meeting Dan.
Oh, I still tell him this every once in a while. I messaged him first on eHarmony. He was the first man that I went out to dinner with.
From
But
eHarmony.
oh, from eHarmony, yes. And that was the only website, was the only online dating that I explored. And he had words in his profile. One, I loved his smile and his pictures. You can see a lot by seeing somebody's photos and what they choose to put in their photo profiles. And it lets you put 10 photos up, right? So of course I had a couple with horses, dogs, a beach, right? I picked some of those things. I think I picked two beach pictures, right? And I was like, okay, let me have a glimpse into my life. And I said a lot of language like I've shared on the podcast. So for Dan, it was, he wanted adventure. He wanted a relationship and a partnership. He talked about light. He talked about
Mm.
photography. He talked about sports a little bit. And so I was like, okay, there's a connection there. And so you start connecting the dots a little bit. So when we were messaging each other, one of the first questions I believe that he asked me, one, I think he had said some of these dating apps and websites and things like that, they actually have robotic profiles. Did you know that? Yeah, I didn't know
Yes,
that.
and I only know that because I watched the Ashley Madison
I
documentary.
did too. Oh my gosh, there's a whole dark world to this like dating stuff that I was like, oh, please don't let me end up in that way. But it was
Well,
funny
they're
because
making money off of it too, right? So they want your money and they're going to make it look like it's working better than it actually is. And so they're going to have some bots on there.
and I would say that I was a lot more cautious about this. That's why I didn't go on any dates prior to Dan, is because there was just nothing that sparked my interest and there was caution there. That's why I think the app, thank goodness eHarmony, allows you the communication within the app at first, and it protects your personal life and phone number a
Yes.
little bit. But I will say, I will laugh at this. Oh my gosh. I was like, Dan, you realize we have been such public figures with our businesses and our coaching lives that all you had to do was put our first name in and our sport, and the whole web blew up, of course, of, oh, you put Cynda and horses in? Okay, there's my website, there's my Insta, there's my YouTube channel. And I was like, okay, so I'm not really that hard to find. And
Yeah.
he wasn't hard either, because later we told each other that I Googled him. Who doesn't Google somebody when you meet them, right? Because you're like, okay, what's there? And so I saw a lot of interviews about his life, his story. And so I got to hear him and see him before I met him in person.
Mm.
He also did the same thing to me. He looked up my YouTube channel, so he got to hear me and see me before we met. And so we also had the communication through eHarmony. We also did a phone call. So we had a lot of ground laying things before we actually met in person. And we were I think a different couple. We talked a little bit about our past, but we also talked about what we wanted in a relationship. It was like, what do you look forward to? What are you grateful for? And one of the stories I remember telling him was, he asked me, he said, what are you grateful for in this moment? And I said, I think I stopped and I took a deep breath and I said, can you imagine? Because we've both been in stadiums all of our life, right? We've been performers in our sports, we've been coaches in our sports. Imagine the biggest stadium and put people and animals in it, things, situations that loved you into being who you are today.
Mm.
anywhere from the earliest memory. Obviously, our parents were in there, our grandparents were in there, some of our aunts were in there. We put horses, we put dogs, he put coaches. And I said, can you imagine the most beautiful stadium of your life full of people that have loved you into being? And that was one of our first conversations. And you had me, girl, at that one. He was like, not that you didn't have me at your profile pics and the way you talked. And this is before we even went out.
Oh,
We
wow.
were just messaging. We were messaging messages like that
Mm.
back and forth to each other that were about gratitude, that were about depth, that were about love, that were about light. And so our connection to each other was much deeper early on, very quickly, because of the willingness that we were to go to find out who we really were and are, and then who we want to be. I'm surprised that I am marrying this man because early on, we had those kind of connections and conversations. So yeah, he had me early on as well. I always tease him. I was like, I'm a little bit faster than you are at this because the man goes a little bit slower, right? That's the big joke about. I was like, I was the first to message you. I was the first to bring this up. And he smiles and he's, yes, you were. He goes, but I'm here now. But it's fun to have those conversations that center around how your perspective is on life. And yet we still inspire each other. And I think we have that dream board of continuing to do that.
And you did share your dream list with him, right?
I did early on. I sent,
Oh.
of course. So here's this man early on in our relationship, or maybe a couple months. I'd have to ask him whenever he read it. That's 30 words that have words like sex, passion, erotic, holding hands, physical touch, all chemistry, electricity, kissing. I think at first I also spoke to him through songs. He'll tell you that too. We always talked about doing a podcast together. I don't know. I hope that one day we get a chance to actually talk together on a podcast, which would be really fun. You said a lot through your music that you sent. We were sharing music with each other. And I was sending songs that had a lot of these things in them when it came to relationships and enjoyment and each other and pleasure. And he was like, I had a pretty good idea of what you were going to be like and what you wanted just based on how you talked, your lists, and your music. And he's still here today. He was like, oh, this is a lot of woman, but I think I can do it. I think I can be with this woman and give to her, which he has been able to be, right? It's just a fun thing to have an experience with in a relationship, is that giving side from a man. I think I say the same thing for Colin. I think he's met you in some places of darkness. He's met you
Mm.
in light. And so far, early on in my relationship, I'd say the same thing about Dan. He's
Mm.
met me in those places and been such a breath of fresh air, whether it's just needing to vent or whether it's him providing physical touch or kindness or wisdom or laughter. I think that's the important thing in a relationship, that you learn about your partner, or those things.
Yeah, it's really funny. Colin and we met so young. It's not like I didn't have a dream list. Like my dream list was like the movies, the perfect man in the movies and the books. And when I'm 16, I didn't even think about any of that. But I've been very lucky with him and we've grown together, I think, through everything we've been through. And instead of apart, where some people grow apart in these instances too. So I feel very grateful for him, but it ain't perfect either.
You have your days, right, where you realize that you're both, and thank goodness as you age, it gets a little easier to provide grace for somebody. I think that was one of the things I talked to Dan about. I said, I'm always going to come to you. I'm never going to speak to someone else in a negative or ill will manner about you, because that just cuts us both. And I said, if I have anything to say, I'm going to come directly to you, and I'm going to find a way to come to you that it doesn't come out sideways. Because that's the other hard part about being human, especially if your hormones are out of whack,
Mm.
is what comes out directly at the person that you love. And so I feel like that's been a fun part about our relationship so far, is being able to hold that space for each other, knowing, and we're so fun because I'm like, look, I'm dating you in the hardest season of my job, which is competition season. And as soon as I'm tapering down in competitions, his job kind of ramping up. And I love it because we both preface it. He's okay, it's a big week and this is what I've got going on. And so instead of guessing, instead of launching each other at each other, anger or frustration or those kinds of things, when it's not each other that's the frustration, it's probably our jobs or our children or something.
Yeah.
It's a way to be able to help each other get ahead in a way. And I think we do that independently, especially you as a business owner and me as a business owner, we look at it, we go, okay, what's coming up for us? What's the week? What's the month? What's the year? How do we prepare for this? And we're really good at that. But how do you do that with somebody in a relationship is something that's really fun to develop.
Colin and I still struggle with that. We had our restaurant for so long that our schedules were pretty set. And then we sold the restaurant and we've had to adjust to a new schedule as well. And he dabbled in the construction management stuff. And then he now is working at the brewery and he mostly works weekends and I work during the week. And we've been having a little bit of a difficult time trying to find balance and finding days off together that we can do stuff together too. That's really been a challenge, but you work it out, you figure it out.
That's the beautiful part about the chapters is, and that's what I'd say to you. What are you looking forward to? What is it in this next chapter? I have people ask me that because they're so excited. I've had people, the fun part about my network is my marketing team got to take Dan and I's story and put it out there to 23 years of emails. We had over 1,000 emails in this bank of 23 years of my career that they'd been doing a ton of business stuff for Champions, what direction we're going, what we're doing, what's exciting, what's happening. And I said, hey, fellas, I said, do you want to know something about my personal life that's new that most people I have never shared? I never shared with my clients what happened in my marriage during the time that it happened. The first time most family even had heard what happened in my marriage was on your podcast. The first time that most friends and clients, and I shared this with a big network of people because I just said, if this helps one person, I want it to go there. And so I didn't share my personal life with somebody who I was in a relationship with until now. And so these guys put out, I've been getting text messages and messages through Facebook and social media, emails through people who have known me for 23 years of being in Colorado that are like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. You're getting married. Oh my gosh, who is this guy? And sharing his story and his life is another piece of that, because I know most people that he's met, especially in the horse world, they're pretty strong women in this horse world. And so they're like, look, buddy, we're going to hunt you down if you hurt this one. And he's
Oh, I'm
okay.
gonna join that wild
Right,
hunt as
right,
well.
right. It's so fun because they preface it. They're like, look, man, you got a good one. But on the flip side of that is we got a posse that will hunt you down if something happens. And he's so funny because he just smiles and he's, look, you don't have anything to worry about. And so I appreciate that he can take on some really strong independent women and be in their presence, because that is what is my world of business, is a lot of strong independent women. And he just gives such grace and ease about being able to be himself and be around this world. And I think he'd say the same about me. The world that he's in takes a certain type and caliber of person too. And being able, he learned that early on about me. He could leave me at an event and know that I could just literally stand there poised, talking to anybody, being present, and not have to even worry about who I was or how I'd carry myself. I think that's the fun gift, that we both have had careers that have been able to develop us to be able to be in each other's worlds. That's another big piece of that.
I love that. One more thing I want to touch on before we start to wrap things up is tell me about the wisdom of horses.
Ah, so dreamy. And I think I always tease people, are like, how long have you been riding horses? And I said, since I was in my mom's belly.
Mm.
Pretty much my mom would say that. I think I was 2 weeks old when they moved to Arkansas, and I can't remember how long it took him to buy a ranch and buy some horses, but it was a pretty young age. I was less than one. So I was around animals at a very early age. And so I would say a lot of my development of my education about the world was on that ranch growing up. And then it has been continued since this career of 2 decades. And so the wisdom of horses is making the connection with all of the counseling and therapy and things that I've gone through, and bringing horses into the space of having them help us with what it means to be grounded, what it means to breathe. Sometimes therapy dogs are like this. You see a lot of feeds, actually, I think, on social media that have either dogs or horses that go to places like even elderly communities and homes, cancer patients. There's something about animals that brings a joy, a light, a presence, a calmness, a groundedness, a breath. And so the wisdom of horses is along these guidelines. I want to work with horses in a new way that's not just teaching people how to ride and how to compete, but it's also bringing horses into the picture and allowing people. I'm going to do a video series actually where it talks about the things that we touched on. Anxiety, loneliness was a big topic. Groundedness was one. Wisdom, experience. Horses, I think, can help people connect to themselves, not only to themselves, but also to the being and the creation that they are. So that's the future, right? That's the business, right? Excuse me, right? As I'm coughing and need some water, right? As these podcasts, you love to talk and you forget that you need to take a drink, right? Or take a breath.
Yes, yes. Take a drink.
That's the future. I touched on that a little bit, I think, in the prior podcast. My excitement to be able to share that with people. I'll put that on the Champions YouTube channel. We'll put it through social media, but I'll literally be doing a session with a horse and I'll be videoing it, talking about breath and connection and talking about things that you're experiencing. I tell people all the time, even in my lessons, tell the horse what's going on in your life. And as soon as they do that, they both take a breath, the horse and the person. And it brings this clarity and less of this guardedness and this kind of stuffing things down, right? I talk about not stuffing everything that's going on in your life down so far in your body that you just don't share it with anyone or anything. And I think horses are not, they're different from people. They have a presence that's welcoming. Obviously they don't have verbal feedback like we do as humans, us speaking the
Yeah.
same way. They have different ways to hold space with their bodies and with their breath that put people at such ease. That's the direction that some of Champions is going to go, is sharing that connection with people. And I think it's going to reach a different and bigger audience, not just the ones that are in the arena that I've done for 20 years. It's going to span past that. So that's the exciting thing about where the direction of the business is going.
And all of that is stemming from your own personal work too, I think.
I think that's the beautiful part about the things that we're doing, whether it's your podcast or even the conversations you have with the women in your chair, is the experiences that you both have that then manifest and develop into what you're doing in your life, right? How that reflects in your life for sure.
Yeah, it all comes together eventually. And I think as we learn more and we get older and we get more mature and we have more of these experiences, as awful as some of them may be, they really do shape who we are and who we're becoming and who we want to be. And I think as difficult as they are, there's a lot of things that people would probably say I wouldn't change that even still.
Looking back, because you wouldn't be where you are today. Dan and I say that we're like, we wouldn't be where we are today without the things that have happened to us, but we're so grateful, right, with where we are now and who we're becoming. That's the other piece of it too.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
I love talking to you and talking about this because, again, my hope is that the words that you and I share, the things that we share, the podcasts that you share with these incredible people that you've interviewed so far are going to inspire, even if it's one person, right?
Mhm.
If it's that one person that it does something with their life, it's just worth it. It's worth the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if I want people to feel less alone and realize that every single person out there is going through stuff. And it's just so, life is not the perfect butterflies and rainbows that social media and things make it out to be, or even people. A lot of people don't like to talk about their struggles. And I get that. And that's totally fine. I fully respect that. But I will say, the more we talk about these issues, the less taboo they are. And the more that people realize, oh my God, I'm not the only person that's experienced something like this. And I absolutely am so grateful to every single guest that I have had on this podcast, because it to be able to trust me and the world that I'm putting this out to share these stories with me, that I know they're not easy things to talk about. They're so hard and they're so vulnerable and raw. I'm so amazed at what this has become so far. And I'm so amazed at the amazing people that have opened up, like you, like every single person I've had on this podcast. And I'm just so grateful to every single one of them. I want everybody to know I do not take it lightly what people are also bringing to this podcast with me. And to trust me with that is incredible.
To say, I think it truly started all those years ago when I sat in your chair. You have an ability and a presence to allow people, you hold a container for them, and then you also trust us with your story.
Mm.
that space. And so you being in this position, I would say, I think, and I'll speak for all the podcasters that have been on, the fact that you've now given us an avenue, a place to say it, and for you to be on with us, to have that personal connection from that chair, right? Conversations from the chair, a podcast. I would say I would speak for us to say that I think that we're also grateful that you're doing this.
Thank you. It means a lot. It means a lot to be doing it. It means a lot to have everybody on here joining me with it. This isn't a solo journey for me. This is a team effort. And so I'm just so grateful. And I'm just consistently amazed at the people that have reached out, that still want to be on it and share their stories. And then I've had a few people on that want to talk about healing modalities and stuff too. And that's been amazing too, that I can share that with those out there, that maybe that will help somebody too. If they don't find any solace in someone else's story, maybe they'll find something that works for them too. So thank you. Thank you. You just made me like cry.
It's a good thing though. It started in the chair for me with you, and it grew from there. And then you're like, I'm going to do a podcast. And I was like, oh my gosh. And you're like, well, you want to be on it? I was like, yeah. I look forward to the people that you have on. I've gone back and listened to the ones that you've had so far. And you've given us a voice, I would say. You've given us a place to have a voice and to be relevant, to not feel alone, all of those things, to be inspiring. This is the beautiful part about where technology and society is, that we have this now opportunity to do this. So yeah, part of that.
Thank you. Thank you for being a part of it. I appreciate you so much for coming on and being vulnerable, and also sharing the podcast with everyone. That helps me as well. So I'm so grateful to you. And I am so grateful to you as a client as well. You're just an amazing human in my life and such an inspiration. And I admire you so much, because you've done so much work on yourself and you've been through hard things. And so thank you for all of that.
Thank you. I can't wait to send this one to the next, it's the next chapter, right? Because I had a lot of people that responded and said it helped closure. It helped bring closure to some of them, family members, friends. It brought back memories for some. It brought a lot of tears for some people because they didn't know that happened. A lot of people said, I'm so sorry, I didn't help you more. And I said, you didn't know. I said, I haven't spoken about it in 7 years. I didn't know. And so it's been fun to hear people's responses. I can't wait for them to hear this one, because it almost brings a joy to those ashes, right? Coming out of those ashes, it brings a joy. So I'm going to be excited to be able to share this one. That way people have even more of a look into kind of that personal life that hopefully can inspire them, not just in the relationship they're in, one that they're maybe looking forward to.
Yes. Yes. I love that. And we will link all the ways to get in touch with Cynda in the show notes. So if anybody is interested in reaching out and maybe sharing their own story, or reaching out for some of the horse therapy or anything like that, that is all in the show notes. So make sure you click on those. Otherwise, thank you so much again for coming on. I so appreciate you. And everyone else, thank you for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. If you enjoyed our conversation and found value in the stories shared, please consider following us on your preferred podcast platform. Your ratings and reviews make a huge difference. They help us reach more listeners and continue bringing you engaging, insightful content. We appreciate your support and would love to hear your thoughts and feedback. Until next time, keep listening, growing, and sharing.